Welcome to No More and Guess Less with Teresa. Here's for a shorty, guys, and please believe me, the only reason why you could possibly not understand this section is because you're closing yourself off to the different words that are being used. Okay, there are 5 different words that we need to come to terms with. Logos, pathos, ethos, and then we still have to talk about the ethymeme and the syllogism. Okay, let's start off with our artistic proofs.
Exactly.
Now, Schnookies, it's super easy to understand. According to Aristotle, there is real proof, which he calls non-artistic proof. Real proof is catching somebody on a video camera red-handed. It is statistics that have been devised by researchers. That is non-artistic, substantiated data that is out there that you can use for evidence. But remember, we're not talking about courts here. We're not talking about statistics. We are talking about rhetoric. And in rhetoric, you need a different type of evidence. And what you can do in order to make your rhetoric and your persuasive communication more substantial is to use artistic proof. Remember, we just said Aristotle looks at rhetoric as an art, something that you can manipulate. So apparently you can manipulate your persuasive communication or speeches in a way that can be maybe as convincing as bringing up non-artistic proof like stats and laws and witnesses. So how do we bring this about? Aristotle says you can do 3 things. You can showcase ethos, you should bring across pathos, and you should definitely also think about logos. I think logos and pathos are easy to understand. So obviously pathos relates to passion, okay? So that is non-artistic proof that uses emotions from the communicator as well as those emotions of the audience. I get to it. Then logos comes from logic. The artistic proof that Aristotle describes here is that you have to be logical in the way you're bringing forward your arguments. That can be super convincing, just like other evidence. And the third one, and this is the one that I'm starting off with, is ethos.
Exactly.
I can see that you might think ethos comes from ethics, which is correct, but that's not exactly what Aristotle was about when he talked about ethos. What he says is that you can be very convincing as a speaker if you display credibility. So how can you bring up your credibility? How can you have this artistic evidence of credibility go up so that people move through the motions with you, understand what you're saying in your speech, and maybe even be swayed in your speech? Firstly, you can display ethos by knowing your subject. So expertise or expertness definitely can be very convincing. Trustworthiness. Trustworthiness is just like a feeling that the audience gets, that you know what you're talking about and that you actually have their best interest at heart. Which brings me to the third dimension of credibility according to Aristotle, which is goodwill. And exactly like I said, if the audience feels that you could be a friend, if the audience feels that they can trust you and they have positive emotions toward what you're saying, then your credibility rating definitely goes up. There is a difference between extrinsic and intrinsic credibility in a rhetorical encounter. Intrinsic means the credibility rating that you get from the actual speech or from the actual encounter. So obviously, if I'm unknown to the audience and I'm giving a great speech, my intrinsic, inside of the speech, intrinsic credibility goes up. Sometimes people already know the orator and they have certain ideas about how trustworthy or not trustworthy these speakers are. So for example, if Elon Musk is going to host a conference on technology innovation, he would have a very high extrinsic credibility rating. So because of his reputation, there's already credibility. But you always want to aim for that intrinsic credibility. And how do you do that? You want to use language properly. You want to be well prepared. You need to be in good taste, maybe even a little bit of humor, maybe a little bit of sincerity or sharing. So that usually brings up your credibility ratings.
Exactly.
The second artistic proof that you should definitely think about is pathos, passion. And that doesn't just relate to the communicator who should be passionate in what they are telling the audience, but it should also relate to appeals to needs with the audience. If you want to arouse your audience, if you want to get them moving, and if you want them to feel, you better start appealing to their emotions, to their needs. Basic or higher order needs, doesn't matter. But you want them to have an emotional buy-in into your speech. Lastly, you want to be logical. And logos actually feeds into your credibility rating as well. So beyond the emotional appeals, beyond the goodwill and trustworthiness that you're showing, you actually have to make sense. So logos relates to the intellect that you're portraying. It relates to the reasoning structure that you are applying in your persuasive encounters. And if you do that well, if you reason so that people can follow your train of thought, yes, you will be more convincing, because rhetoric is best when it actually shows evidence of credibility, passion, and logic.
Exactly.
The last tiny little bit that I need you to go through, and I'm not the biggest fan of this section, I will tell you outrightly, is the difference between syllogism and enthymeme. So we're just coming from this idea of logos, logical reasoning. And for Aristotle, who lived a long time ago, logical reasoning is a structure. It follows a certain pathway of reasoning. And this is where we come to the syllogism and the enthymeme. Please, guys, just repeat the words aloud while you're listening to this podcast. Syllogism, syllogism, syllogism. Enthymeme, enthymeme, enthymeme. Please also remember how to spell these words. You don't want to embarrass yourself. So the syllogism is a reasoning structure that has three parts. We have two premises to the argument and a conclusion. So basically the syllogism is a very straight up and straight out way of reasoning. The example that they're giving you here is a very stupid example. All philosophers are Greek. Aristotle is a philosopher, therefore Aristotle is Greek. So you can see we have two premises that will make the conclusion a logical one. Watch out, guys. Just because the reasoning is logical doesn't mean that the premises are true. Are all philosophers Greek? No, they're not. Yeah? But if you're wrapping a little turd in a gift box, it actually sounds quite good. It doesn't make any sense what they're saying here, but it sounds good because the reasoning is sound. The enthymeme is very similar to the syllogism, but this time you are skipping the conclusion. So you would say all philosophers are Greek, therefore Aristotle is Greek. So instead of saying directly that Aristotle is a philosopher, you're skipping over that step, and this time you're portraying a two-part reasoning structure. Now, the enthymeme is a great reasoning structure to apply if you're dealing with very educated audiences. If you're dealing with young and naive audiences, rather go for the syllogism. You don't want to jump to conclusions with younger audiences or uneducated audiences. Now, I challenge you. Can you maybe think of a better example for a syllogism and a better example of an enthymeme? Just take a minute to think about some great syllogism reasoning structures that you could possibly bring up in your tests, assignments, or exams. Once you have the syllogism, of course, you just have to skip the conclusion and you will have your enthymeme. Syllogism has 3 parts, enthymeme has 2 parts. See you in the next one. I hope you enjoyed it, Schnookies. Until next time, bye!